It's very important that everybody's on the same page and understands that you will fail if this stays within the IT organization by itself. The IT organization usually has no idea how much your contracts are worth. And so when they see something, the all-in cost is going to be $300,000 to $500,000 a year, they usually say, wow, that's the cost of a new house. Wow, that's super expensive. And yes, it is expensive. And it would be a lot of money for any of us individually. But if your company is making 10, 20, 30 million dollars from these government DoD contracts and you don't spend a 300 to 500K, you could find yourself in a position where you are laying off people.
Welcome to Trust Issue by BEMO, the podcast where we go beyond checkbox compliance and get real about security. In every episode, we will break down what's happening in the world of CMMC, cybersecurity, and GRC, straight from the people building, auditing, and living it. Real conversation about real security.
This episode of Trust Issues, we're going to be talking about who is part of the CMMC Level 2 team within BEMO and kind of what that means for organizations seeking compliance, to just kind of use as kind of a benchmark of kind of what it takes, what type of people and how many people it takes to really get everybody involved. Within BEMO, right, we're a 50-something CMMC Level 2 certified MSP. So we help organizations seeking compliance actually achieve CMMC Level 2 themselves. And we ourselves held our own certification in addition to, ISO 27001, SOC 2, HIPAA, et cetera, right? So we primarily helping people within the Microsoft ecosystem achieve these very challenging security frameworks. And so just within BEMO, to think about within a 50-person company, what does it look like on our own team? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 people of our 50. So let's call it like almost 20% of the company that is involved in CMMC Level 2. That doesn't mean everybody's a control owner or has to meet certain assessment objectives within CMMC Level 2, but there's a lot of enablers and people that maybe you wouldn't expect. So when you think about what it's going to take to get your company to CMMC Level 2, it's going to require a lot more than the IT person, even though the quote-unquote IT or security person does own, let's call it 50, I think it's like 60-ish% of the controls. There's a lot of things to think about here. So for the very first part is the CEO. So the CEO, they're generally the person who signs the SSP, the security system security plan, and accepts the risks, right? So everything flows up to them and they're basically signing off on, like we're doing everything legit and all that stuff. So the very first thing that I see when I'm talking to a lot of prospects or a lot of, organizations that are trying to do this is they're like, oh no, the owners of the company don't care. The CEO doesn't want to get involved. This is an IT project. And I will tell you that if leadership does not get involved, you will absolutely never become CMMC Level 2 compliant. It is the number one leading factor for why organizations literally are never become ready and will not pass CMMC, is because they silo everything into IT. Because yes, it's an IT thing, or large portions of it are, but it requires PM, it requires CFO sign off, a lot of stuff. So we'll kind of walk through that. Number 2, CFO. CFO is incredibly important to this conversation. Again, they don't own any controls or objectives, but I will tell you that for a lot of companies in the, let's call it 20 to 200 employee space, something like CMMC Level 2 is going to cost you somewhere between like $200,000 a year to like $1 million a year, right? And that's not because CMMC, like the CMMC certification itself is only costs like, like 50 grand. However, like most organizations that are doing this have not invested or completely underinvested in their IT and security infrastructure over the last 10 plus years, right? Basically, since DFAR 7012 came out, they basically haven't been doing anything security related. What that means is the CFO is really going to have to be involved because this is going to cost you a pretty penny, right? Like, let's call it like $500,000 a year, $300,000 to $500,000 a year for a company of 50 people, right? And that means the CFO is going to have to get involved. And one of the things that's really important with the CEO is that you identify what is the current contract value from your defense contracts And for any new contracts that you're going to want to bid on past November 2026, what are those requirements, right? Like, are you going to be able to self-attest to level 1, level 2? Are you going to require external certification? What about your current contracts? Are you going to have to do anything for those? When do they expire, right? Like, there's a lot of this comes into just like company growth planning and trying to understand the risks of like what happens if we don't do this. Do we lose 10, 20, $30 million worth of business? Does it simply mean that we can't grow next year because all the new contracts we want to bid on require an external certification? That's really up for you to research. Obviously, November 2026 is a big date, but it's not necessarily a big date for everybody. And you don't necessarily have to be externally certified by November. And a lot of things are going to change over the next 3 years. But that's good for you to do your own research because I can't really pinpoint that number for you. But let me tell you, if something is, let's say, worth $10 million, then you can bet that 500K, 300K is probably going to be worth it. But again, the CFO is going to have to be involved to approve potentially new hires internally, maybe 3, 4, 5 new tools or vendors that you're going to need to pay for the C3PAO and all that type of stuff. Now let's go to the team. So the first one that we have, I'll just talk about is Kata. Kata is essentially our IT manager, and he's in charge of like the day-to-day security, the day-to-day implementations of the Microsoft 365 environment, all of our tools, etc. Right? He owns 64 of the 110 controls, the NIST 800 171 Rev 2, and that basically maps to 190 of the 320 assessment objectives. Right? He's basically the main guy that, like, on a day-to-day basis, right? Security engineering, he kind of owns, right? So I think that's why a lot of CMMC Level 2 kind of just gets stamp of this is an IT project, and then it gets shoved in the closet, basically. But he's got a lot of support, right? And one thing to also note about the IT person is there's a huge risk in having everything in one person. Especially if you're at a smaller company of maybe 20 to 100 people, you oftentimes will only have 0, 1, maybe 2 people, oftentimes 1. And what ends up happening is if that person, I've seen this with my current clients, where if the one person leaves, you're really screwed because oftentimes there might be someone who, like Jeremiah, the compliance manager, who might be like, I'm in charge of the SSP and the policies and the procedures, but I don't know anything about IT, right? And that one person leaves and they basically fumble in terms of like they don't know how to do anything with the Microsoft environment. They don't know how to maintain any of the IT or security, right? So that can definitely be scary. I think it's one reason why you should either divvy up the responsibilities into multiple internal people, or you start using an MSP or MSSP or an RPO to kind of have shared responsibilities and to have a little bit more business continuity when it comes to the CMMC program. Now, so Kata just does like all the security, right? All the security. So think about it primarily like the Microsoft 365, your password vaults, your SOC, your SIEM, kind of all the core stuff, your MDM, your mobile application management, all that stuff. Then Jeremiah is the compliance manager. He is running and is mostly responsible for all of the documentation, more or less. So ensuring that we have our policies and procedures and they're up to date and we're following the process. We're following all the things that BEMO is saying we're doing on a monthly, quarterly, annual, periodic basis, right? So he owns 7 controls and 23 assessment objectives. Then we've got Binny, right? So think of this. Binny is basically the person who is going to maintain and collect all the evidence, do all the automations to get all the evidence on a periodic basis, right? So sometimes this can be compiled with or set with other people, right? Here I have 9 people, but you could have easily put this under one person. The challenge of putting this on one person is they're not going to have time to do all this stuff, right? We're 50 people. It still takes us like 9 different people involved to kind of maintain this. And we're an MSSP, MSP, and RPO that does this for other companies, right? And these people are just doing it for our own. They're not doing it for the other companies necessarily, right? So it really does take a huge village to go do this. Then you have Ron. Ron is essentially the program manager, project manager for the program itself. So with 9 people, as you can imagine, there's a a lot of people that you have to go corral. There's a lot of deadlines. There's, renewals of tools. There's within your SSP when you say that you do things periodically or on a monthly, annual, quarterly, whatever basis, like that means that that's got to be on the calendar, and the program manager is going to stay on top of that, right, and ensure that you're continuously compliant with the program, right? There's internal assessment renewals every year, right? Then you have your external certification every 3 years, right? So there's always going to be milestones and reoccurring activities that have to get done, and program manager is essentially making sure that that happens, right? So that's very much a compliance rule. As you can see, we also have Cindy, who's our senior director of operations. She owns the physical media and supply chain controls and the assessment objectives, right? But you could definitely see how maybe the operations people kind of get clumped together as well. But it is very important that there is people outside of IT, and that you have essentially an ops function that is overseeing this entire program. Then we have Sylvia. Sylvia is our senior director of operation people, so essentially head of HR. And so she has the personal security and training controls and objectives. So as you can see, CMMC Level 2, it has nothing, there's many controls and assessment objectives that IT is not responsible for. They can kind of help and coordinate. But when it comes time to the audit, and to have the audits with your C3PAO, it's going to be Sylvia or whoever your HR person is who's going to be speaking to those and providing the evidence for those, and walking through the auditors for that type of stuff, right? So when you show up to the audit, or to the mock audit, to the external audit, to the internal audits, you're going to have all of these people show up, and essentially they're going to take turns. So when the C3PAO goes down one by one of all 320 assessment objectives, basically each control owner is going to have different responsibilities. And then we also have the people who are like the support and enabler people who are also there to help support, show, do screen shares of that evidence, because as you can imagine, 700 plus pages of evidence. There's a lot of stuff to show, and you have to have a lot of tabs up to quickly walk through and prove every single one of those assessment objectives, right? So it's definitely a lot of work. And then we've got Julio. Julio is security operations. He is Kata's counterpart. So he's doing a lot of the SOC SIM, the monitoring, the detecting, responding. So essentially incident response plan. He is in charge of 19 controls and 63 assessment objectives. So there's 5 people who are actually owners and directly involved. And while maybe their job isn't 100%, let's call it, they're not each working 173 hours a month doing this. Obviously, Kata is, and Julio is probably half his time. But then, you're going to have maybe 10 hours a month from Ron, and another 20 hours a month from Jeremiah, and it's a mix, right? So as you can see, it is much more than one head count, especially for a team of a company of 50 people. And so when you kind of zoom out by function, you have security and security operations are 59% of all of the controls and assessment objectives, right? This is why there's a huge emphasis on IT and security. However, we have 2 full-time people working on just the security related controls in NIST 800-171. And we still have people who are in operations, we still have compliance people, and we still have HR who help out on a monthly basis. All right, so I hope that was helpful. I think this is a good kind of table to just show other people internally and build that coalition to your own leadership team to get everybody behind the CMMC Level 2 initiative, and make sure that everybody's on the same page around it being probably your company's number one initiative for the year. If your company is going after CMMC Level 2, and if it's an external certification, and it's not like a CMMC Level 1 self-attest or CMMC Level 2 self-attest, this is really good to get everybody on the same page to make sure that they're bought in for the initiative. Because if it does become an initiative for your company, it will eat up. It will be the number one initiative for the calendar year, for your fiscal year, and it will eat up the most resources in terms of time, in terms of people, in terms of capital, most likely. And so it's very important that everybody's on the same page and understands that you will fail if this stays within the IT organization by itself, right? The IT organization usually has no idea how much your contracts are worth. And so when they see something is, the all-in cost is going to be $300,000 to $500,000 a year, they usually say, "Wow, that's the cost of a new house. Wow, that's super expensive." And yes, it is expensive, and it would be a lot of money for any of us individually. But if your company is making, 10, 20, $30 million from these government and DoD contracts, and you don't spend 300 to 500K, you could find yourself in a position where you are laying off people, right? And that's not fun. And nobody wants to do that. We all want to grow. We all want business to be good. And so it's very important that strong leadership and getting buy-in from everybody will help you be successful. So thank you very much, and I'll see you guys later.
That is another episode of Trust Issue. In this conversation, help you think differently about compliance, security, or trust. Share it to help someone who is still stuck in a checkbox mode. Each week, we will keep bringing you more episodes, resources, and real-world insight from the BEMO team. Wherever you are listening from, don't forget to rate the podcast and follow us to stay up to date on the latest development in the GRC space. Remember, compliance gets you certified, but real security, that earns trust. Thank you for listening.